Hey guys, Spud here, and in today's DCS MiG-29A Fulcrum tutorial video, we're going to be going over the basics of how to navigate through a mission using the NS430 bolt-on navigation system. The DCS NS430 is nearly a one-to-one simulation of the Garmin 430 GPS system that many of you guys out there who are GA pilots are probably very familiar with. And it is available as an extra add-on for the MiG-29A Fulcrum for $5.99 US on the DCS Store. In today's tutorial, we're going to be going over the two most basic methods of navigation with the NS430, flight plan mode and direct-to navigation, and how these two intimately linked modes interact with each other, along with when and why you would want to use them, especially in a very fast fighter like the MiG-29. The NS430 is a pretty cool way to add a ton of new capability to the Fulcrum and simulate the myriad of bolt-on and even handheld GPS and GLONASS systems seen in use by military MiG pilots in both the East and West, along with privately owned warbird pilots. So without further ado, let's jump in and get started. I wanted to start off today's tutorial here in the mission editor so I can better orient you guys to the flight plan we're going to be flying through for our tutorial on navigating using the NS430 system. And I also wanted to show you guys how to activate the NS430 system for your MiG-29, as that's been the source of some confusion out there in the community. Now, for today's flight, we're going to be flying a Polish MiG-29 on a local area orientation flight as we get ready to provide aggressor services for a NATO exercise here in Norway. And because we're flying and needing to navigate, of course, so far north at very high latitudes, we're going to need to use a GPS system to augment the INS that's native to the MiG-29, because flying so far north towards the Arctic Circle can give the legacy INS system of the MiG-29 some problems. So to actually activate the NS430 in our cockpit, all we need to do is go over to the Aircraft Additional Properties tab over here on the right hand side, and just ensure that we have the Allow NS430 box checked right here. Then we can do an additional check to make sure it's working correctly if we can see the NS430 box populate in the cockpit of our MiG-29 just to the right hand side of the HUD. And we can see it goes away and comes back when we check the box there. So for our flight plan, we're going to be flying over Evenes Airfield at waypoint 1, then making a left-hand turn and flying over Endoya Airfield at waypoint 2, then making a right-hand turn and flying kind of an extended, elongated pattern around for a landing at Bardufoss, which will be our home base for the aggressors in the upcoming NATO exercises. So with that out of the way, let's jump in the cockpit and get started here. Okay, loading up, going pretty quickly here. The Kola Peninsula map always loads pretty quick for me, which is nice. We'll recenter our track IR and jump into the cockpit. Okay, so right off the bat here, make sure we pull the throttle back a little bit so we can save some fuel and not fly too fast. And we'll get the aircraft nice and trimmed out. Okay, so we're good to go. And right off the bat here, we can see the large NS430 box just to the right-hand side of our HUD. And while it does take away some of our forward visibility, those of you guys who are used to flying aircraft like the F-4 Phantom or the F-14 Tomcat, this should be barely a hindrance to you. Now, before we get to Evenes Airfield, let's go ahead and zoom into the box here and take a look at some of the basic controls and functions of the NS430 system. In the very center here, We have the main display, which can show us things such as our moving map, as well as additional information on corresponding additional pages. Our comm stack for adjusting frequencies for our communications to ATC, our wingmen, and other facilities. Our Vorlok stack down below for frequencies for radio navigation to VORs and localizers, for radio navigation and shooting localizer or ILS approaches. On the right-hand side, we have all of the controls for navigating using the NS430 system. The rocker switch at the top here allows us to zoom in and out on the map, and we can see the range scale on the bottom left of the screen here. Please keep in mind that this can be a little bit confusing because it's the range from side to side of the screen, not from the center of your aircraft to the edge of the screen, so that can be a little bit of a gotcha there. Down below, we have our Direct To button, which allows us to navigate direct to an airport, waypoint, or any other type of fix. A menu button, which allows us to set up the map with different customization options, how we enter information to data fields, things of that nature. A clear button for getting rid of any data we've entered into a data field that we may have made a mistake on. An enter button for entering said data into a data field. And then down below we have our right hand knob. The right hand knob is used mostly for navigating through the various pages of the NS430 system. As a good rule of thumb, the large outer knob is really good for navigating through different types of pages, such as a navigation page, waypoint page, auxiliary page, a nearest function, and etc. The smaller inner knob is used for going through various subpages of the type of page you're taking a look at. So we can see a north up, or a track up map as opposed to a north up map, and this map here will also show you traffic around you if ADS-B was simulated within DCS World, which it currently is not. And then you can go through another of other subpages of the nav function of the NS430. Now, down below, we have some additional functions, such as being able to see our active flight plan that you will have set up in the mission editor, or that you have set up manually through the NS430 system. We have a CDI button for changing between radio navigation and GPS navigation. 99.99% of the time in DCS, I imagine you're probably going to be using GPS. You can see various messages. And the OBS function is for essentially flying a course line directly to a waypoint or an airfield that you set manually for, say, if you were needing to, say, intercept and track a radial inbound to a fix, such as a waypoint, a VOR, a TACAN, a airfield, things of that nature. Then, of course, we have all of our functions for our radio communications. We have a button for switching the frequencies from the standby to the active. Same button here down for the Vorlok stack. And we have volume knobs for our comms and our Vorlok stack, so that way we can adjust the volume of people's voices on the radios, as well as the identifiers of various radio navigation aids. Now, for the most part, the knob on the bottom left side here is for adjusting radio frequencies. We can use the large outer knob for changing values that are to the left of the decimal, and the inner knob for changing values that are to the right of the decimal. And you can click it in for then adjusting the Vorlok stack frequency. So with that out of the way, we'll go ahead and start to navigate towards Venice Airfield. Now guys, one thing that's important to keep in mind when navigating using the NS430 system that isn't necessarily so much of a worry in the Mi-8 HIP or the Mi-24 or the L-39 is the fact that in the MiG-29 here, you are going very, very fast. And in reality, the 430 system that was originally designed by Garmin was designed for much slower airplanes like GA airplanes, helicopters, things of that nature. So Some of the navigational functions in the NS430 are more geared towards those slower aircraft. But I'll show you guys how to work with that in a little bit here. One thing to also keep in mind is the 430 system is not in any way connected to the legacy INS system of the MiG-29 Fulcrum. So you just have to keep that in mind as you are, say, looking at symbology on your HUD here and thinking that it's somehow tied to the NS430, which is somehow tied to your INS system. These are independent systems from the 430. Whoop. Man, I cannot wait till we get a functioning autopilot for the MiG-29. That is going to be very, very helpful. So looking at the flight plan page here, we can see that we are navigating on the leg from waypoint 0, where we spawned, to waypoint 1, which is going to be over the top of a Venice airfield. We can see that this leg is activated by the pink line on our moving map display. Additional legs of our flight plan are shown in white because they are not currently active. As we fly over the top of a Venice airfield, like many other INS or GPS navigation systems, the system is automatically going to cycle itself over to the next leg. And that's where we're going to get into the first gotcha that comes up, because our MiG-29 flies so much faster than, say, a Cessna 172 or an Mi-8 HIP or even an L-39. And you can see here, by looking at these beautiful mountains and fjords of the Kola map, we are definitely cooking on this little local area orientation flight. And of course we can zoom in the map a little bit here to see if we're getting off our track or not, so we'll come back off to the left a little bit here. Then if we wanted to see exactly how far away we were from waypoint 1 over the top of Venice airfield, you just open up the flight plan page, we can see, oh, yep, they're about 10 nautical miles away. And off the nose of our jet, yep, there it is, there's the airfield. So now we can kind of take over visually and just fly over the top of the airfield. Get closer and closer here. And then as we fly over the top of the airfield, we're going to see the legs of the flight plan cycle to the next leg. And we can see the approximate magnetic heading we need to turn to fly from waypoint 1 to waypoint 2, about 332 degrees. And boom. We now have cycled to the next waypoint, and then looking over onto our moving map page here, we can see that in the MiG-29, because we are flying so fast over the top of our waypoint, we're going to have to turn quite a ways back off to our left-hand side here in order to re-intercept the line between waypoint 1 and waypoint 2. And we may not want to waste that time in order to fly back around to that course line, or we may not want to waste that gas because, of course, in the MiG-29, every little drop of gas counts. So that's where we can kind of start to use the direct to function of the NS430 system. Now, instead of navigating back to that active leg of the flight plan, we'll just fly direct to waypoint 2. So we just need to hit the direct to button here, use the large knob to change which data field we want to enter into, down to the flight plan section, then use the small knob to select waypoint 2, hit enter, and then to activate, once we've selected waypoint 2, we'll hit enter once again. And we'll go back here, and we can see we now have a new pink line drawn across the map that will bring us directly to our airfield. Or our waypoint 2, I should say. So we'll start to just kind of come back around, kind of pointing our aircraft symbol back in the direction of that next waypoint. And let's say that for whatever reason we don't want to go back to this new pink line that we've drawn using the direct to function. Well, we can draw another one super easily. We'll just hit the direct to function once again. Waypoint 2 is already pre-selected. We'll hit enter and we'll activate it again. And on the direct to page here, it automatically brings up the CDI function of the NS430 system. So we can put this little vertical line here up at the top, near the top of the triangle of our CDI, and that will have us flying directly to our waypoint that we've done a direct to function to. That's a lot of twos there, sorry. And then if we wanted to, of course, go back to the moving map, we can do that there. And we know everything is currently working correctly because we can see off of our nose the little tip of the island where Andoya Airfield is currently located. And if we wanted to see the CDI again, we're right there. We wanted to draw yet another pink line to just get everything nice and centered up. We can do so there. And now we just have to follow its guidance. You can also see here that because we're flying very, very fast in a MiG-29, and the system again was designed more for GA type speed aircraft, the navigational sensitivity of the NS430 system is a bit wacky and a bit high for a MiG-29. And so it can feel like you're not navigating very precisely, but in reality you're actually being quite precise, as we can already see Andoya Airfield out there in front of us. And we can see the distance to that direct to point down below as well. This is why I typically like to use more of the moving map functionality in the NS430 as opposed to trying to keep a perfect eye on that very, very sensitive CDI. Alright, at this point I can pretty much take over visually as I can see that waypoint that I want to fly to. We can check and see how much further it is, 14 nautical miles. And this brings us to the next kind of cool function of the NS430 system when it comes to basic navigational skills. Once you do a direct to a point, such as waypoint 2 or waypoint 3, or any of the points that we set in the mission editor, as long as it's part of your flight plan, once you pass over that point that you've done a direct to towards, it's going to cycle back to the next leg of your flight plan and just put you right back on that original flight plan, which is very, very helpful and very nice, especially when you're, say, trying to fly a long-range mission in an aircraft like the MiG-29 or the L-39 or the Mi-8 HIP or any other Russian aircraft that can utilize the 430 system here in DCS. So we're just heading on over here. And we're almost right on top of it. And boom. It's now cycled back to the next leg of our flight plan. And because we've got a pretty big right-hand turn to come back around to that next leg of our flight plan to the beam point of Bardufoss Airport, what we can do is we'll probably end up doing the same thing that we just did to hit Ndoya Airfield, and we'll just do a direct to our next waypoint, as opposed to trying to make a big right-hand turn and re-intercept the course line between Ndoya and our Abim waypoint. Zooming out on the moving map a little bit here, we're kind of sort of basically pointing towards our next waypoint, so we'll do another direct to function here. Direct to, scroll down once again to the flight plan data entry field, down to our waypoint called Abim, enter, enter, and boom, we're direct to once again. And then that'll cycle to the next leg of the flight plan, and again down the road here. So we'll go ahead and stop the video here for the interest of time. If you guys would like to see further videos on the functions of the NS-430 system, whether that be here in the MiG-29 or any of the other Russian airplanes that can utilize the system, please let me know in the comments section down below. It's a very cool addition to the MiG-29 that makes navigation an absolute snap, even if it is a little bit hands-on with all the controls for the system. But when you're flying on a map such as the Kola map that is so close to the Arctic Circle, it makes navigation instantly accurate and an absolute breeze, as opposed to having to work with the legacy INS system that is going to be wandering and wobbling all over the place. And it'd be really cool if we could use this system in aircraft such as the F-14 Tomcat or the F-4 Phantom. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope this helped you guys out, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Fly safe out there and enjoy this beautiful game.